Konnichiwa, watashi achi ya group 8 desu.
Do you know what language that was?
That was Japanese.
This is in connection with the novel that we are about to tackle,
Which is Memoirs of Geisha, written by Arthur Golden.
But first, do you know what is geisha?
Wait, what is geisha?
A geisha is a member of a group of professional women whose occupation is to entertain men.
It's a story of a young Japanese girl named Chiyo Sakamoto who is sold by her impoverished family to a geisha house to support them by training as and eventually becoming a geisha.
Let me introduce you the author of Memoirs of Geisha, Arthur Golden. Arthur Golden was born and raised in Tennis, the city of Chattanooga, holds 978 degree in art history from Harvard College with a specialization in Japanese art. Graduated from Columbia University with a master's degree in Japanese history and a certificate in Mandarin Chinese in 1980. Went to work for a magazine in Tokyo after spending the summer in Beijing University and graduated from Boston University with a master's degree in English in 1988. Lived and worked in Japan before returning to the Boston to teach writing and literature. Memoirs of Geisha, Golden's best-known novel, was written over a 6-year period. During its creation, the work was completely rewritten 3 times. With each rewrite, Golden shifted the point of view to say Golden had a conversation with a number of geishas during his research for the novel, including notable ex-geisha Mineko Iwasaki. Did you know that Iwasaki sold Golden for the breach of contract and defamation of character when the Japanese edition of the novel was published? But in February 2003, the lawsuit was settled out of the court. So let's proceed to the summary of the book. Actually, it has around 448 pages. And to sum it up, my member Cayman Mills will explain and discuss it to you.
Yes, thank you for that, Dimple. So for the full book summary, my name is Kay and I'm here to discuss. But before we read what's written in the PowerPoint presentation, let's first know who is the main character of this novel. So, the main character here is Chiyo Sakamoto, and her story starts here. In 1929, the 9-year-old Chiyo Sakamoto lives in a small fishing village in western Japan with her ailing mother, emotionally withdrawn father, and an older sister named Satsu. And the first struggle she faced in her life is when the wealthiest man in her village, Mr. Ichiro Tanaka, takes notices of her beautiful blue-gray eyes. After striking a deal with her father, Mr. Tanaka sells her to an okeya. Okeya is a boarding house for geisha. But what is a geisha? So as Janice told at the very start of our presentation, geisha are women trained to entertain men with conversation, dancing, and singing. When Chiyo arrived at the okeya, she worked there as a maid while she trains to be a geisha. Now let us know the people living there. We have the young apprentice geisha named Pumpkin, the greedy and materialistic named Mother, who also runs the okeya. And lastly, we have the beautiful but cruel geisha Hatsumomo. Now let's go on to the next line written in the PowerPoint, where she almost flees from the okeya. So the story behind it is that after arriving in the okeya, Chiyo felt so homesick that she tries to run away to her home village. However, the doors to the okeya are locked at night. So she climbed to the roof, but she fell and broke her arm. Mother was so angry that she stops paying for Chiyo's geisha education. Instead, she tells Chiyo that she will work as a maid in the okeya until she sees Chiyo in Feet's release. So for 2 years, Chiyu works as a maid until one day she goes on an errand and realizes that her life lacks purpose and direction. As Chiyu sits by a stream and begins to cry, she met a handsome man named the chairman. The chairman confronts her and she was touched by his kindness. Chiyu decides that she must try to become a geisha so she can increase her standing in the world. Only then will she be able to surround herself with kind men instead of people like Hatsumomo and Mother. So, not long after this encounter, a geisha named Mameha arrives at the Okeya and takes notice of Chiyu's beauty. Mameha convinces Mother to reinvest in Chiyu's education by saying that she will take on Chiyu as a little sister. A little sister is another name for a geisha princess. So since Mameha is one of the city's best geisha, Mother sees an opportunity to make money from Chiyu again and agrees to Mameha's plan. But Chiyu thinks that Mameha is only taking her on a fatigue in order to infuriate her rival Hatsumomo. So on to the next slide, please. So for over the next 2 years, Chiyu completes her geisha training and makes her debut as an apprentice geisha. Following the geisha tradition of adopting a new name, Chiyu takes on the name Sayuri. At one event, Mameha introduces Sayuri to the wealthy businessman named Toshikazu Nobu and chairman Ken Iwamura. Sayuri realizes that Chairman Iwamura is the man who confronted her years ago, the man which she was touched by his kindness. However, Sayuri doesn't get a chance to talk with the chairman because Mameha tells her she must cultivate a relationship with Nobu instead. Mameha wants to make Sayuri a success in Kyoto by having Nobu and a doctor nicknamed Dr. Crab start a bidding war over Sayuri's Mizwagi. Mizwagi is the ceremonial taking of a young geisha's virginity. Yes, a young geisha's virginity. After months of cultivating relationships with the two men, Dr. Crab ultimately pays a record amount for Sayuri's Mizwagi. And the plan worked, so Sayuri gains a reputation as a highly coveted geisha. As part of geisha traditions, Mother adopts Sayuri because she becomes the highest earning geisha in the Okeya. So over the next few years, Nobu continues to ask for Sayuri's company. Though she likes Nobu as a person, she wishes she could spend more time with the chairman instead. But when the World War II breaks out, the government closes the geisha districts so that the women can more actively contribute to the war effort. Nobu uses his influence to find Sayuri the safe and relatively easy job of sewing parachutes in a village outside of Kyoto. After the war, Nobu comes to find Sayuri. He says that he needs her to return to Kyoto and help him entertain a Japanese official named Sato. The American government wants to seize Nobu's business assets, but Sato can use his connections to prevent this from happening. Sayuri agrees and returns to Kyoto. So what would happen next? So let's move on to the next slide. At the tea house, Sayuri along with Pumpkin and Mameha entertain Sato, Nobu, and the chairman. For the next year, they met on a weekly basis and Sayuri feels her attraction to the chairman growing. Sato successfully convinces the Americans not to bankrupt the business, so with the business secure, Nobu proposes himself as Sayuri's Dana. So what is a Dana? Adana is a patron who gives a geisha lavish gifts in return for sexual privileges. Yes, sexual privileges. Because Nobu provided her a safe place to live during the war, Sayuri feels as if she is in debt. She reluctantly agrees, wishing that the chairman could be her Dana instead. To celebrate the good news, the group goes to an island near Okinawa. Sayuri realizes that if Nobu stumbles upon her sleeping with Sato, then Nobu will think that she has dishonored herself and withdraw his proposal to be her Dana. So Yuri hopes that this plan will leave her free to pursue a relationship with the chairman. So Yuri arranges to meet Sato at an abandoned theater and tells Pumpkin to bring Nobu at the same time. Pumpkin, however, brings the chairman instead, who sees Sayuri and Sato having sex. Thinking that her chances are ruined with the chairman, Sayuri feels crushed and utterly disappointed. So, are you all wondering what will happen next? So let's move on to the next slide. A few days after returning to Kyoto, Sayuri receives an invitation to meet the chairman at the tea house. At the tea house, the chairman confesses that he fell in love with Sayuri the moment he saw her as a young girl crying by the stream. Surprised that he even remembers her from that day, Sayuri says that she only slept with Sato in order to make Nobu give her up so that she could possibly have the chairman as her Dana. Overcome with the emotion, the chairman pulls her close and kisses her. Chairman kisses Sayuri. And a few weeks later, the chairman becomes Sayuri's Dana. They live happily together over the next few years. Although they did not get married since the chairman is already married, but Sayuri still gave birth to the chairman's son. And eventually they immigrate to the New York City, where she recounts her memoirs to the Japanese history. And eventually, after years, the chairman and Nobu died, although they are not in this world. Sayuri said that they live in her heart. So that would be all for the full book summary. Now let us proceed to the literary elements, which is to be discussed by Divine Jane.
Yes, thank you, Kate. So for the plot, let me start with the narrator of the story. So Memoir of Geisha is written in the first person point of view. It's from the perspective of a young girl who grew up as a geisha in Kyoto, Japan. So second, setting and context. This is where and when the story happened. So the Memoir of Geisha, the story happened before, during, and after World War II. But specifically, the story happened mostly in Kyoto, Japan. So next is the tone and mode of the story. So the story shows the calmness and thoughtful mood of the story, and followed by the protagonist and antagonist, which shows that Sayuri is the protagonist and Hatsumumu is the antagonist. And next is the major conflict, which is the difficulties one has to endure in order not to betray his or her love, and so on. And of course, lastly is the climax of the story, where the exciting part of the story starts, which Sayuri got adopted by Mamiya. So next is the main characters of the story. First is Chiyo, also known as Sayuri, the main character in the book. Hatsumumu, the extremely beautiful but cruel geisha. Nobu Tahikazu, one of Chiyo's admirer. Iwamura Ken, the chairman. Mamiya, a successful geisha. Pumpkin, a geisha same age with Chiyo. And followed by other supporting characters. So for the themes, the story shows love where it is the predominant theme found in the book, as well as destiny, betrayal, and loyalty. So next is there another 5 elements of plot: the introduction, rising action, falling action, and the resolution. So for the introduction, Yeoh finds out her mother is dying. So first, there was a 2 young girl lives in a poor fishing village by the sea and was sold to a geisha house to send money back home. But as she was working, she heard a bad news that her mother died, and followed by the starting point of her journey as a geisha. So for the rising action, let me start. In 1929, Yeoh Sakamoto was sold to a geisha house by her father alongside with her sister Satsu. Yeoh was taken in Miyake, Kyoto, whereas her sister was sent to a brothel and started training as a geisha. And one day, Yeoh was crying in the river unnoticed by the chairman, Ken Watanabe. The chairman gave her a shade of ice cream, money, and a handkerchief. Because of that kind act of the chairman, Sayuri wants to become a geisha and wants to be part of the chairman's life. So this is where Sayuri inspired to become a geisha. The main reason why Sayuri wants to become a geisha is because of the chairman. She wants to become part of the chairman's life. So several years later, Pumpkin debuted as Maiko, and Mamiya reinvest to Yeoh's geisha training and become a Maiko and change her name to Sayuri and become one of the most famous geisha. And because of that, Hatsumomo felt jealous and started spreading fake news about Sayuri's virginity, which makes the things more difficult. But luckily, Mamiya find a solution to solve the issue, and Sayuri won the maze race and become the adopted daughter. That makes Pumpkin and Hatsumomo more felt jealous and mad, and set up a situation to ruin Sayuri. So that was the rising action of the story, where the conflict of the story started. So for the climax, Pumpkin was angry to the point he humiliated Sayuri's wish. He bring Chairman to witness what Sayuri was doing. Here the story starts to show the theme of the story, which is the love, betrayal, and loyalty, where you can witness the character's development, story's development, and where the main point of the story starts. So for the following action, this is where we will know the reasons of the betrayal, as Pumpkin revealed her anger that she was jealous because of her mother's adoption of Sayuri. So basically, the main reason of the betrayal is because of jealousy and anger. Where Chairman and Sayuri reveals their feelings toward each other. Lastly, the resolution. Finally, Chairman becomes Sayuri's Dana. That would be all for the elements of plot, and now let's proceed to the literary analysis, and it will be discussed by Janet.
Hi everyone, I'm Janet and I will be talking about the literary analysis of the novel Memoirs of a Geisha. Every author has their own way of highlighting their works. Some books achieve an engaging read by focusing on the book's theme. It can be adventure, science fiction, or fantasy. Arthur Golden, on the other hand, has used sheer eloquence of his writing to make the extremely realistic existence of Nate Sayuri and enjoyable to read. So, throughout the novel, Golden employs a range of literary elements, including metaphor, allegory, and imagery. So, the entire work of the novel Memoirs of a Geisha is centered on water and with metaphor. Many references are made throughout the book to Sayuri, the main character having an exceptional quantity of water in her nature, which makes her journey a little bit easier. So in this passage, it is very evident that it is a prediction of Sayuri's life. Even though she gets hurled from one place to another, she did not give up. Instead, she solved her own problems. So Sayuri's activities are usually described by Golden in a metaphorical writing. So in the second passage, it entails Sayuri's growth as a character in the novel. Golden not only uses her words and actions to convey this to us, but he also uses Sayuri's surroundings by letting Sayuri describe her surroundings as amazing. And this entails that she's conveying her emotions to us, her readers. Symbols play a great role in the novel itself. Another piece of symbols that can be found in the novel is that the Misuwagi represents or symbolizes the Geisha's virginity. It can be seen in the third, or it is evident, or we can find it in the third passage. So an apprentice geisha give men who they're fond of rice cakes in a velvet box, or in a velvet box full of rice cakes. It is an offer, or it is an offer for them to bid for their Misuwagi. So in the next passage, which is the fourth one, Chiyo describes her surroundings as amazing, while Sayuri perceives the world differently from Chiyo. She perceives it in the eye of a mature lady. As I had mentioned earlier that symbols plays an important role in the novel. In the fifth passage, the butterfly emerges from a dark pod, symbolizes Nita Sayuri's character development in the novel. From a small little village girl transforms into a strong woman, a strong geisha. In the next passage, the sixth passage, this is from when Chiyo's attempt to flee from the Ukiya while she was viewing water. So the writing here is a water metaphor in which when a water encounters a barrier, it usually and may easily flow around it. In the last passage, Chiyo Sakamoto, her name is a metaphor of her character development, her growth as an individual, her growth within the novel. When she was a little girl living in a small village, she was deemed weak. But as time passes by, as problems she encounters and eventually overcome it, she had grown into a strong woman. But in the end, she's now Nita Sayuri, a strong woman we all love.
I hope that everyone understood the discussion.
But before we end, we have a question to ask.
Are you also struggling in life like Sayuri?
Do you wish to have your own chairman?
Bye, and thank you everyone for listening.